One of the things that happens when you live with perfectionism and imposter syndrome is that you are really concerned that people are not going to like who you truly are. And so every choice that you make then, every little decision becomes enormous, because what if I make the wrong choice or I say the wrong thing, then all of these bad things could happen to me.
Hi, welcome to the ADHD Social Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Maguire. Today on the podcast, I am speaking with Dr. Sharon Saline. She is a PhD in psychology. She is a teacher, an author, an instructor. She is an absolute expert on perfectionism. And we are going to talk deeply about the idea of perfectionism and ADHD and how it's related to masking. It was such a rich, fruitful conversation. We talked about Dr. Saline's history of bullying when she was a kid and the tie to perfectionism. It's just fascinating. So if you are thinking about anxiety and perfectionism as something that you want to know about, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Okay, Sharon.
Hi.
Tell me, you write a lot about and you talk a lot about perfectionism. Mm-hmm. And I may resemble that like slightly. And you, probably by the end of this, I'm going to realize I resemble it a lot. But can you tell me, like, what do you mean by perfectionism?
Well, perfectionism is it's multi-layered, and what we want to think about when we're thinking about perfectionism is the need to get something just right in what you decide right is, or what you imagine other people think right is. And so what we see a lot is, particularly for people with ADHD, is that perfectionism is a way to control outcomes when they feel like internally their experience has been that things haven't gone that well for them, or they have externally gotten the feedback that you're doing it wrong, you're messing up, etc., etc. So when people with ADHD or without really are aiming to be perfect, they're trying to kind of compensate for a sense of things feel out of control. I'm worried I'm going to be put down, or I myself am worried I'm going to miss the mark like I have in the past. So I want to be super careful that doesn't happen. So everything has to be just right. And it's really a facade, because there is no perfection, right? Nobody's perfect.
No, I wish that it was that easy. But I mean, it sounds kind of, Sharon, like a mindset. Like, is it a trauma response or is it a mindset? Can you tell me?
I wouldn't, I'm sure people who have trauma, have some sort of perfection. But I think that I don't really think of perfectionism as a trauma response per se. What I think about is when people feel insecure and uncertain, they want to have a method, a tool, a process by which they can exhale, that they can feel like they have some sort of way to manage. And perfectionism is that process. I'm going to do my best to make sure everything is just so, because then I feel more secure and safe.
It makes total sense to me. I see it all the time in my clients and in myself. Do you think that it affects our relationships? Because I feel like it does. And by that I mean friendships.
It absolutely affects friendships, and I'd love to address that on a couple different levels. So first of all, there's like perfectionism that we have for ourselves. I myself need to be a particular way because I again, this sort of idea of feeling in control and wanting to manage things. And so that then, how that spills over into friendships is feeling like unless I look a particular way or act a particular way, people are not going to accept me for the way I am. And so that's when we kind of get into that whole issue of masking, right? I'm going to present this put together, or goth, or whatever it is, if you're a teen, and if you're an adult, however you want to look, sort of outside, but inside, I feel very, no one really knows what's going on, that the sort of turmoil that I'm actually feeling. So that's one way that perfectionism affects relationships. The second way that perfectionism affects relationships is when people project onto others that they need other people to be perfect. So there's these two components. One is how I am in a relationship, and one is what I expect from others, or how I expect others to be. And both are equally problematic, because the standard that you can hold yourself to is may or may not be what's actually going on or is even achievable, and you don't know what other people expect of you. You're just imagining it. But the other thing is when you judge other people because they don't live up to these standards of perfection that you hold for yourself, that can really create conflict in relationships.
And I think many of us have experienced that in friendship, where someone imagines or tries to control what we do, or we feel judged, and it's you can say, oh, I know it's this other person's perfectionism, but it doesn't feel good.
No, because it feels really terrible to be on the receiving end of being a disappointment, right?
Yeah.
Or being rejected, in particular, because I don't live up to this standard that you have, I'm not good enough for you. And that, no one wants to feel that. And that's how, perfectionism can really kind of infiltrate and even poison, friendships, because people bring, they either mask so they don't bring who they really are to the relationship, or they are kind of bringing too much of themselves.
You're making my bed and rearranging my house, right?
Exactly. I think you should do it this way, and then why aren't your clothes color coded and stuff like that. So
oh my God, can you imagine, Sharon? We have ADHD. My clothes are not color coded, everyone. My clothes are not color coded.
But this is, we were talking a little bit earlier offline about bullying. And so part of what happens, so I was bullied as a kid. We moved when I was at the end of my 5th grade year. So I lived in Haddon Township. I had a group of 5. It was 5 of us. We were really good friends. And then I moved to this place, Cherry Hill, which was around the corner from where my aunt and cousins lived. And I went to a new school as a 6th grader. And it was a little hard. Actually, because in those days, our schools went from kindergarten to 6th grade. Middle school was 7 and 8, and high school was 9 to 12. And I had come from a school which had a lot of independent study and was kind of progressive for a public school. And I went to a more traditional school where it was a one classroom, where there were 3 sixth grade classrooms. They had a gifted program at the school. And of course, I was, not of course, but I was brought into the gifted program. And there was a boy in my class named Benji, and he didn't like me. And he didn't like me because I was as smart as he was. Maybe smarter, to be honest.
I think smarter.
And so he got all the other people who he had known to tease me and gang up on me and make fun of me. I was teased about going to the gifted program. We would go out for the playground for lunch, and people spit on me. I had like a brown bag lunch, and people put worms in my lunch. I mean, it was bad. And then on top of that, because we had moved to this new house, and it was like an acre, and in the back there was like a stream, and I was playing in the stream, and I got poison ivy, and I had an allergic reaction, so I was covered with poison ivy.
Oh, that's so rough. It's so rough.
I was like, it was horrible. I was like itchy, and then I have to go to school, and people didn't like me. And but Mr. Telenoff, God bless him, put me at a table with 3 other girls who were very smart, Leslie, Beth, and Paula, and those were my friends for the whole year. He moved other people's desks around. He never moved the 4 of us.
Oh,
isn't that so
him.
Nice? And, over time, things got a little bit better, and at the end of the year, there was a school dance, and someone actually asked me to dance.
Oh.
But by the time that had happened, we had already made a decision in my family that I was going to go to the other middle school. So there were 2 middle schools in my town. My elementary school fed right into, and a few people from my elementary school went to, depending where you lived. And so I would cut behind my house so that I could catch the bus to go to the other middle school. And that was a really good decision for me, because I got away from all of those horrible people, and had a new start and had a great experience in middle school, which is very unusual. But then when I went back to high school at the beginning of 9th grade, those people were there, and some of them tried to start it up again. It didn't stick, but it happened. And, I think that when you're bullied at that age, it sticks with you.
Oh my God, yes.
And it sticks with you. Like, I'm very much an extrovert. I'm very comfortable talking to people, but I also am sensitive. And I think there is a fear, inside, that if I don't do things right, I'm going to be teased and bullied or rejected. And so that's my perfectionism. And that's where I get stuck. It's always funny to me that I talk a lot and write a lot and work with people around perfectionism as a recovering perfectionist.
But, I had a client last night who said this to me, and she said, if you hadn't been bullied to the point where it's a topic of a book, I don't think you would understand me. Mm-hmm. Right? And like, when people put up walls, and, I was describing it's like a castle, and like that we sometimes put up standards that are so high, like no one can get into the castle.
Yeah.
I think it takes one to know one, right? So because I have gone through that phase and I'm a recovering, my moat and my walls are down, but I did used to have a moat and I did used to have a castle, and, maybe nobody could meet those standards as a result of being bullied. I feel like that is so helpful because I understand and I can spot those people like a mile away, right?
Right.
And if you had this like idyllic 6th grade, you might not understand even just the fear of entering 9th grade and that those people are there and they could come back, which I so resonate with. Like, I feel like if I saw these people in like a mall or, a food court, I'd be like, oh my God, they're here, even though we're, in our 40s.
It's true. I don't know if you watch this show, but there's this great show on HBO called Somebody Somewhere. And it's really a beautiful show. There are 3 seasons. And one of the characters is gay. And he goes with his partner to a men's church group. And in the church group is a man who really bullied him in high school. And, he's kind of avoiding this guy as much as possible. Like, you see him sort of maneuvering in scenes and stuff. And then at the end of the meeting, the man comes up to this character and says, I want to apologize for how I treated you in high school. It was really terrible, and I'm sorry. And the character's like, nah. And then the guy keeps going and saying, it wasn't okay. And the character's like, it wasn't. It was really hard for me. And I thought, oh my God, how many of us would
love that?
Would be so healed if the person who tortured us came up to us and said, I'm sorry. That was terrible what I did.
Yeah, that's never happened to me, but it would be really nice. No, I think that that's true, and I definitely think the lens you put on perfectionism is important because you are a recovering perfectionist. One other question, though, sometimes when I see perfectionism, and this isn't me judging, this is me sort of observing, I notice some stuck behavior. And I think it's like obviously academics or schoolwork, but I also see it in friendship. Like, I can't pick where we're going to go, right? Like if I have clients who like agonize over, should I ask this person to coffee? Should I ask them to a meal? Should I not ask them? Should I wait until I run into the, and some of that, you tell me because you're the expert, but is that a little bit of perfectionism?
Well, I think perfectionism can, of course, affect how we make decisions and foster doubt and sort of decision paralysis. I mean, of course, there's perfectionism procrastination, which affects task initiation and types of paralysis. I think that one of the things that happens when you live with perfectionism and imposter syndrome, because the two are sort of left and right hand, they're intimately related, is that you are really concerned that people are not going to like who you truly are, and so every choice that you make, then every little decision becomes enormous, because what if I make the wrong choice or I say the wrong thing, then all of these bad things could happen to me. And so I think that that's a heavy burden that people carry, and so that's where masking comes in, because I'm gonna be easygoing. I'm going to be like, oh no, you decide, and whatever you want is fine. So that therefore I'm relieved of the responsibility that it could go bad.
And now we're lopping also into people pleasing, right? Because
yes.
I don't want to go to your restaurant, or I don't want to do what you're suggesting, but I'm going to pretend because I am so afraid. I'm afraid you won't like me if I say, sorry, that's not my cup of tea. Is that am I getting that right?
I think that so that people pleasing is absolutely a part of perfectionism, and that's part of how perfectionism relates to imposter syndrome. I want to make sure that things go a particular way, and then actually when they do, I can't believe it really occurred, so I'm not going to take credit for it, because again, there's that kind of avoidant, I don't want to take the responsibility, I don't believe that I deserve it if something good happens. If something bad happens, of course that's the case, because I predict those bad things will occur.
So all going back to our inner critic who is there negatively framing everything, because and I see this so much, Sharon. I don't get credit for anything good, what you just said. Everything bad is my fault. The genesis must be me, and then everything good is just, some other reason, not like I did a great job. And I feel like that affects relationships too, because in that scenario, I'm paralyzed.
Correct. And also, if you're in relationship with somebody, let's say, we're friends. So we
are friends. Know the truth about me, right?
Right.
I don't want to go there.
Right. So let's say we're friends, and I say to you, Caroline, I think this chapter that you wrote is fabulous. I love how you do this, and this. And your response is, oh, I didn't really do that much. My editor helped me a lot. It was my idea, but I don't know. Then that has an effect on me. Because what I feel like is, here I'm giving you this gift of support and of praise, positive feedback, and what you're doing is you're pushing it aside and dumping it in the wastebasket. So then I feel like I'm being pushed aside. And so I think that's not purposeful, but I think that's a secondary response.
And I feel like, and I definitely have experienced that. And then there is a part of me, sometimes it will think, well, why am I bothering to give you that positivity? Because I've tried and I've tried and I've tried to help you see the good, or I've tried to help you see the magic that is you, and you won't take it. So I don't know, do I keep trying? Like, I personally do, but I know other people who say to me that they're not going to because they're tired,
Yeah. And that can lead in a relationship to pulling back, and then possibly to the rejection that someone might
the perfectionist was avoiding, right,
fears in the first place.
Well, and there's another one aspect that you talk about in many of your webinars, which I majored in Dr. Sharon Saline this week, and I watched so many of your webinars.
So
it was fun. It was really fun. And one of the things you brought up that I definitely feel is true from as a person trying to friend, right? Mm-hmm. There's people who, my husband will say, why aren't you friends with so-and-so? They're so lovely, or like they're readers like you're a reader, whatever. And I'll say, I've been trying to get to know them for years. I've been trying to get past the facade. And as an ADHD person, like, I don't really do facade forever. Like, I want to be really friends with you, right? Mm-hmm. And I have lots of acquaintances, so I'm not looking for acquaintances. Like, my dance card is full. And I'll say to my husband, I really like that person. They do seem nice, but I never get past the superficiality. And you said that in one of your webinars that, like, because I'm trying to control everything, or because I have such imposter syndrome, if I'm a perfectionist and worried about these things, I don't show my true self.
Right. And the thing is, though, I mean, it's hard to know, like, for people with ADHD, there's often been relational pain, these adverse experiences. So you are going to protect that vulnerable part of yourself. We all do that. But when we do that in relationship with our intimates, we don't build a really true connection.
I agree. And I think that's, ultimately, I think that's the sad part about it too, is I think a lot of the people I know who have this terrible self-critic and everything, what they really want is that true connection.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what everybody wants, actually, some level of true connection.
Yeah.
We don't we come into this world as human beings. We're wired for connection. And so, how do we go about that? And that's when people have imposter syndrome, they are, protecting themselves as much as they can from possible pain of rejection and then, isolation and alienation. So I'm going to not be my true self in case you reject me or you put me down or I don't do it right, so that therefore there's a layer between what happened and my vulnerable, wise, intuitive self. So I'm protected. Only it doesn't really work. The thing is that it's still kind of those rejection or negative comments, they still worm their way in there. This is clearly a talk about worms. They kind of wiggle their way in, and then they eat away at the core of the apple. So I think that's hard. I don't know about you, but I have plenty of clients who remember very well the specific times when people said negative things to them.
Oh, 100%.
I can't hold on to any, when they received positive feedback.
And I'm going to let you wrap up because I know you have something, but I thank you for talking to me about this. I enjoyed majoring in your webinars this week. It was fun. I had them on. They were like Netflix. They were in the background.
I'm so touched. That is just the sweetest thing. I love talking to you. This was so much fun.
I love talking to you too. And we always have the best talks. Even when we're, driving and at the deli and whatever.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I love your work. It's just a pleasure.
Thank you.